About 100 prosecuting attorneys in Ohio have pursued criminal convictions by violating the standards meant to preserve a defendant's civil rights. An investigation by NPR and Columbia Journalism Investigations found that some of those prosecutors broke the rules more than once, and no prosecutor was disciplined. Here's NPR investigative correspondent Cheryl W. Thompson.
Our second case this morning is 2021-215, the state of Ohio versus Ernie E. Haynes.
Ernie Haynes still shudders when he thinks about those days in court, standing before a judge charged with kidnapping his own grandchildren.
You think it'll get easier when you talk about it, but it don't. It don't.
Haynes' run-in with the law began in 2017 when his daughter died from a drug overdose 2 weeks before Christmas. The court gave custody of her 3 boys to their biological father, a decision Haynes disagreed with. He says the man struggled with drug addiction and he thought the children would be better off with him and his wife. So he rounded them up and drove to a relative's house in another town for the holidays. As Haynes was packing up his car to return home to the Toledo area, police arrested him. The charges? 6 counts of abduction, 2 for each child. The grandfather would spend the next 5 years fighting to clear his name.
I didn't do anything wrong. What am I supposed to do with the kids?
What Haynes didn't know was that he was up against an overly eager assistant prosecutor with a track record of misleading juries, withholding evidence, and violating other legal standards, all to win convictions. In the Haynes case, he misstated the burden of proof in his closing arguments. That prosecutor, Thomas Matuzak, is one of about 100 in Ohio who the courts found violated legal standards meant to protect a defendant's civil rights in criminal trials.
Good morning. My name is Tom Matuzak. I represent the state of Ohio in this matter.
He's one of 13 who violated standards more than once during a 4-year period. None was sanctioned by the state Supreme Court. 2 are now judges. Julia Bates says that's not how the system is supposed to work.
Winning at all costs isn't the answer. We have to defend not just the victims, but we defend the defendants too, because they're part of the system. We have to make sure that their rights are not trampled in the process.
Bates is the prosecutor for Lucas County, home to Toledo. She also was Matuzak's boss. She remembers him as a good prosecutor, but someone who had to be reined in more than once.
He was very passionate and he was very committed, but sometimes he went a little far. And so, we had to, sometimes put a little bit of a muzzle on him.
In a phone interview with NPR, Matuzak insisted that he did nothing wrong in the Haynes case or the 6 others the higher courts have admonished him for during his career. Bennett Gershman is a former prosecutor who now teaches at Pace University Law School in New York.
It's shocking. It mirrors the rather indifferent, complacent attitude of disciplinary bodies.
He called the pattern in Ohio a microcosm of the criminal justice system across the country.
Once you start focusing on these prosecutors, you can learn a lot about the prosecutorial psychology, mentality, and why prosecutors engage in unethical behavior and why they consistently get away with it. You'll find other jurisdictions in America which are equally shocking.
Joseph Caligari is the disciplinary counsel for the state of Ohio.
I think there's this perception that, prosecutors do no wrong.
His office investigates allegations of prosecutorial misconduct and files complaints with the Ohio Board of Professional Conduct. The former prosecutor says it's imperative that officials hold prosecutors accountable.
Most of the prosecutors are extremely ethical, but the stakes are so much higher that you can't tolerate a few bad ones. You've got to try and weed those out.
Appellate judges have handed down numerous improper conduct rulings in Matuzak's criminal cases. Some of his bosses, elected prosecutors like Paul Dobson of Wood County, knew about them.
There's no doubt that he drew more allegations of prosecutorial misconduct. I don't agree with all of the rulings of the court. I do agree with some of them.
Dobson says he advised Matuzak to be mindful and meticulous when trying cases to avoid allegations of prosecutorial misconduct.
We were engaged in conversations of saying, look, you now have to draw back even farther than somebody else would stop those kind of allegations, to get the court to recognize that you're not just going to ignore what they're saying and walk over the line.
By the time the Haynes case went to trial, appellate judges had already found that Matuzak had acted improperly twice. Matthew Rieger was the trial court judge in the Haynes kidnapping case.
I never understood why this case had to be prosecuted. I was a prosecutor for 20 years, and my approach to prosecution was kind of goal-oriented. Okay, what are we trying to achieve? This was a grandfather who it appears was trying to protect his grandchildren.
Still, jurors found Haynes guilty of 3 felony counts of abduction and sentenced him to a year's probation. On appeal, he claimed that Matuzak had violated his constitutional rights. More than a year later, the court found Matuzak's closing arguments were erroneous, but not egregious enough to have affected the trial's outcome. Last December, the Ohio Supreme Court vacated Haynes' conviction on unrelated grounds.
When I was so relieved, it was like, well, I'm not a felon now.
For Haynes, he says he just wants to move on. Matuzak left the Wood County Prosecutor's Office in 2020 and now tries criminal cases in Ottawa County, about 30 miles away. Since arriving there, he has racked up another 2 rulings of improper conduct, raising his total to 7. Cheryl W. Thompson, NPR News.
That story was reported in collaboration with WVXU in Cincinnati and the Ohio Newsroom.